So I am delighted to be asked to moderate this panel today to talk about the Boston Bootcamp, which CK Group and Cushman and Wakefield and others have sponsored for these guys and us to have an amazing trip to Boston, and these fantastic panellists who will have some great insights on what they've learnt while we were out there. I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk to you about the Boston Bootcamp and what it does. So the initiative runs as a competition where these guys applied, and that application process was judged by one nucleus and then some external sponsors, and then they, as a prize, they won the trip to Boston, where the aims of the programme were to fill some knowledge gaps from the UK for companies that were looking to kind of move into Boston or at least learn more about the Boston ecosystem, and kind of meet the people that one nucleus know out there, and the great workshop sessions that they got, which I'm sure they'll tell you throughout this panel were invaluable and useful for other sponsors, so, and I'm sure extremely useful for them as businesses. So I think we're going to talk over a few things today. So firstly, I'm just going to ask the panellists to introduce themselves, ask why they applied and what they hope to gain kind of before we went out to Boston, and then throughout the session we'll talk about what they did gain while we were out in Boston and their insights to share with all of you. So we'll go left to right. Left to right. Right to left. Jamie, you start.
Thanks, Natalie. Hi, everyone. So I'm Jamie Renison. I'm a partner at Cushman and Wakefield. We're one of the sponsors, along with CK and a few other service providers. And we think it's, I mean, the reason we're involved, we're a real estate provider, and it's a really valuable insight for the cohorts who won the place to get into the Boston Bootcamp. But it's invaluable for us as well to see how the Boston marketplace works. So the reason we sponsor this is, one, to support the One Nucleus ecosystem, which is doing a fabulous job in this country, and needs as much help as it can get, and two, for us to see how we can better it in the UK, because everyone regards Boston as the best place to do science. I think we shouldn't fear it. We should learn from it and celebrate what you've already got in this country and in other and in Cambridge particularly.
Perfect, John.
Okay, so yeah.
On behalf of Priya.
Yeah, so I kind of drew a bit of a short straw here. So yeah, I'm John Telfer, VP of Program Management at RNAvate, which is a circular RNA company, which, if you are strong enough, is a stone's throw in that direction in the Maya building. But yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me along. So Priya does send her apologies, but also she's hugely thankful for the opportunity that the On Helix guys and the sponsors provided to her. So I think one of the things she was looking to gain was actually get more of a sense of how the funding environment is in the US at the moment. I think we certainly have our challenges here, but I think in the US it's also mixed in with individuals in the politics there. We're in an RNA company, and I think RFK has very publicly said he's not a fan of RFK, so I think it'd be good to get an update on how that's going down in the investment community there. So yeah, it was a useful week.
Thanks, John. Jason?
So my name is Jason Yip. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Tailor Bio. We're developing small molecule targeted therapies for cancers with chromosomal instability. We're based here in Cambridge. We're a really small team. There's actually 8 of us. So part of the reason that we initially applied to this was we just really wanted a trip to Boston. But aside from that, I think the idea of exploring the ecosystem there, understanding how the American ecosystem and environment works, was something that was really valuable to us, because we grew up as a company here in the UK, and it's pretty much all we've known. So it was a very different environment, and it was great for us to get that exposure.
Great. Hi, I'm Hannah Saw. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of PharmEnable Therapeutics. So PharmEnable, we're decoding basically what biology and what targets need to deliver innovative new medicines by mapping new areas of chemical space. Yeah, really, I love the honesty there. Yeah, we also, I think, a free trip as a startup, a free trip to Boston where it's all happening is a big draw. And I would say for me, it was also around investment and BD, because that's ultimately what is absolutely critical in the lifeblood of a startup. So
fabulous. I think, John, you touched on kind of learning about fundraising while you were out there, and I think it was clear to us while we were out there. And we were out there in April, so it was a very challenging time in April. And I think since some of you, and I know some of our colleagues, have gone to bio, and I think there was a little bit more positivity from then.
I would say that there was. I mean, I think that we would all probably understand there's a high amount of uncertainty geopolitically, but I would say personally my takeaway was April was extremely low, with a significant amount of uncertainty day to day on tariffs. Now it seems like the tariff issue is over and now it's Iran war, but
so it's a glass half full kind of girl.
Yeah.
It was quite difficult and tough when we were out there, and yeah, just for us to talk about that. And I guess since then, we've been back a little while, what we learnt then, how we've been able to put that into action since we've been back, and where the market lies now, and what our key takeaways were from what we learnt while we were out there in reference to getting funding from US investors for UK companies.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, Priya lists her 3 Ds, which I can read out here. So differentiation, so what makes you different from other companies and other players in the sector, and then the data, so what data do you have to actually support that you're differentiated, and also that you have a proof of concept or proof of principle that is investable, and then the final, probably most important one is the number of dollars that you're asking for. And then did she also layered in the strategic fit, so how well you align with what the investors are looking for, and she felt that what we will see kind of moving into a space where actually more scientifically challenging diseases will not see investment because they're seen as high risk, and we'll also see investment shifting more to focus on companies where they are in the clinical ready rather than the early stage innovators. So I think for a company like RNAvate, which is not in the clinic yet, I think that the in vitro and in vivo data package that we can generate will be very significant in looking for funding over the coming year.
So from my perspective, I thought you always think the grass is greener on the other side. So I think the thing that was a key takeaway for me is that it's really tough actually everywhere. So one of the things that was very clear, they're very, very proud of themselves in Boston. Very proud. We heard multiple times how proud they are. And they have 18, I can reel off the stats because I heard it so many times. They have 18 of the top 20 big pharma there, and the amount of investment that's gone in. So it's huge. And they were still saying it is the worst and it's the deepest that they have ever seen. And I think that was the thing that was quite interesting for me. But I would say that there is hope. So what I think became very clear is the differentiation, and having a very clear story is absolutely vital. And that goes whether you're going for investment or you're going for partnerships, because both are really key. You need to know why they should work for you, why should they should work with you, and be very clear on that differentiation, and then have a story to tell in order to have that. So those were the key parts. And I would say also one other bit, because it was also really helpful, was on the investment side to treat it as a BD deal as well. So really being incredibly organised and expect to be speaking to certainly tens, if not hundreds of investors, and being very specific and knowing which investors, and actually having a target list of which investors are most aligned to you. So use a CRM.
I think for me, and I'll caveat this with, we haven't raised a round that significant yet, so I don't know whether this is true or not, but I guess what we heard over there, which I thought was quite interesting, is just showing up matters. I think for whatever reason, still that relationship formation in person, being consistently present at events or being able to run into somebody at whatever it was, at the venture cafe or whatever was happening was still important to kind of be known and to be seen and to be in network. And I think as a UK-based company, particularly a Cambridge-based company, we very often silo ourselves and kind of just sit in Cambridge and talk to just people in Cambridge and don't necessarily place the same amount of emphasis of being as present or as visible in these networking events. And my take from the experience that we had in the bootcamp was, especially in Boston, especially in America, it seemed like you needed to do that more, and especially in person. So that's something that we would try and do, but obviously the challenge there is the funding to be able to go and do that, which again is why we're thankful of opportunities like the Boston Bootcamp.
Amazing. I think we've touched on it. Just to reiterate, we did all have some really valuable and great experience getting to meet people that we wouldn't have met otherwise, and have nuggets of information that I think was provided by the bootcamp. So I think, I know we touched on it a little bit, but what would you say your key takeaways were specifically about securing funding and tips for getting in front of investors? If we haven't touched on them already.
No, I'll go. So I would say, coming on from Jason's point, they said, whatever you do, don't just rock up, never been there before, and think you're suddenly going to get lots of meetings and you're going to get lots of deals, because that's not going to happen. So I would say the key takeaway is that investment or BD is all done through people, and it's absolutely vital that you build up a network, and not just once, that you continue and you nurture it. So I would say for an investment side or BD, it is about people and networks, and that was my key takeaway.
Perfect.
My thunder's been stolen, so I'm not really...
Jamie?
Well, I'm obviously not raising money because I'm not a scientist, but I thought one of the lectures we did sit in on was with the Whitehead Institute, and we had Professor Lodish, Harvey Lodish, who's been around the block for a long time, and was very kindly gave us his time. The thing which I took away from that was credibility is pretty key in raising money, and I don't know if he was there to offer his services, but he was essentially saying, as a former MIT professor who's invested in lots and lots of companies and sits on lots and lots of boards, must have been in his 80s. But he said, if you get a professor on side and to support your science, it was very interesting that he basically said that is a very quick way of getting credibility. And I thought that was very interesting. I don't know if he offered any of the candidates a position on the board, non-exec, but that was interesting.
And I guess funding aside, what were the other key kind of takeaways? Because Jamie and Harry very graciously organised a trip to look at some kind of lab spaces, so opportunities in real estate, and then Nick put on an IP session, which whilst it wasn't directly related to getting funding, it's obviously all about propelling yourself to be out there in the future or potentially doing that, and just knowing what's an option. I think that would be good for people who are thinking about it, even if it's not something that you guys are thinking about right now.
I would say, coming to Jason's point earlier, we get in Cambridge to thinking that we get so used to just being, sometimes in Cambridge. And so the first thing was that CIC isn't Cambridge Innovation Capital. It was the first sort of key point that I learned. So it's an amazing innovation hub in Kendall Square. So for me, I think the key on an investment is, we all know, and it's always been a key point, is IP. And that comes to the documentation that was discussed in the previous panel, is that making sure that everything is very clear, and the importance of making sure you have not just your obvious IP sorted, so your patents, etc., but all the trade secrets and everything else that goes around it. So you have a full IP package, and that is absolutely vital for fundraising, both in the UK and also in the US. So I thought that was a really helpful session.
One difference that really stood out to me was following off the back of the session we had at the Whitehead Institute that Jamie was talking about. We actually got an opportunity to sit in a lecture that was running for one of the courses there, where essentially it was PhD students as well as MBA students from MIT that had come together for a course that were essentially doing a biotech entrepreneurship course, which is then evaluated by actual VCs like Third Rock and 5am, who were prospectively, potentially evaluating for investment. And what I took away, which is quite incredible, is how integrated it was all the way from academia at the earliest stages, literally mid-PhD, towards, translation and actually having a VC sitting in the room who could credibly take this idea and move it forward, and learning about that entire journey as well. I think here, if I contrast that to studying in Cambridge, we have attempted to do that, but nevertheless, there's still this disjoint between industry and academia where it feels like you have to step out of academia and then step into industry. And there's not quite that same integration that I saw over there, which I thought was really impressive. I thought the caliber of presentations from students that were really just PhD students that were effectively pitching startups were like better than us, basically. And I think that's something that I'd love to see Cambridge and the UK in general try and adopt more, if that were possible.
That was something else, actually, that Priya commented on, actually, that seems to be a very clear route for entrepreneurship and building from PhD through to kind of the senior industry leaders in Boston. And that was kind of underpinned, as you said, Jason, by a very open VC and broker community that it's got to be super synergistic, right? If your broker community and VCs, investors, are very closely aligned and open to your entrepreneurs, it's going to work both ways. It's going to be really, really quite a potent thing in Boston, I think.
Jamie, anything to add?
Yeah. I mean, I think their attitude to risk is very different in the States to in the UK, and I think that has enabled and has built over many years what they have, and they are much more on board with risk generally. That doesn't mean their ideas are any better, but I guess they're prepared to fail more, and often do. But they're happy to get up and start again. And I think that's a cultural thing as much as anything else. But I think they are very much set up to do that. But there is an incredible underlying. What I found interesting is you go around and you look at the bricks and the mortar and the streets, and the streetscape is no different to any other town. And it's what happens under the scene or in the buildings that you really begin to understand what the power of the Kendall Square experience is. And it is down to all the institutes, but it's more down to them all coming together, coming out of the buildings, meeting and networking like you do here, actually. And that's what I took away was actually the UK aren't bad, actually. They're very good at innovation. Actually, these networks, I think, are really, really good, and there's a foundation there. It's just at a smaller scale at the moment. I think, as one of the previous panellists was saying, that big pharma crave the ideas, and a lot of you guys have got the ideas that they're really craving. So I would encourage the big pharma, and that's one of the things I'm keen to see happen in the UK, for big pharma to bring over research and set up in the UK to get closer to these ideas. I think that'd be fabulous for everyone, and then we'd get more innovation as a result. But all the big pharma I talk to, they are very set in their ways, and location sort of happens to them. It's quite interesting. They acquire a company and go, oh well, let's grow that part of the business, and that's how people end up in Philadelphia or all these sort of slightly random New Orleans. I mean, Merck are in New Orleans. There's no real reason for that other than they bought a company that were in New Orleans. I mean, bizarre, really. So I think there is an opportunity, but this takes years and years of planning. And dare I say it, the government have to play a part in that to encourage them at an economic level. But as I say, I think all you guys play an equal part in that, because you're the ones who really they want to come and sit next to. So more of that, please.
on that lovely message, we'll go to taking your learnings from the Boston Bootcamp and kind of putting it into impact. So if we could just talk about kind of what you would take away and how you're going to apply that kind of to your long-term business plan or long-term ideas. I'm going to get Jason first so no one steals his thunder.
I think for us as a small company, as a biotech, I think in this environment, fundamentally fundraising and investment is crucial. I think one direct thing that we have taken away from this is we will continue to pursue an American or a US-based lead investor. And I think we will refocus our efforts there as opposed to UK and Europe. I think it's unfortunate that we have to do that, but whilst it's hard for everybody, the risk appetite still seems to be greater there. And I think this is evidenced really by, I think HSBC does a couple talks, but I think this year in the UK, there's been over $1.1 billion of investment in life science companies in the first half. Over 900 million of which went to two companies, Isomorphic and Vediva, both of which were led by US VCs. And I just feel like that paints such a picture for us that it's quite clear that we have to go over to the US.
Impactful. I love it.
Steal that, Hannah.
We create bonds on the bootcamp.
That is true. Coming to network and people, I think it is vital. Yes, you get a great build a good relationship with everybody that went, but also one of the things that we're looking at is not how to become more US centric, but what is that story to come into the pitching, being bigger and bolder in that, but also is there any sort of key people we can bring in as advisors or something to help with the sort of the US connection and the credibility from a US perspective? Because I'm with Jason. He's stolen my thunder now. I think it is about finding a US lead investor. I think that is really vital. We're not just focused we have not started fundraising yet, but we'll be doing that later this year. I think it's now we need to look globally for fundraising, and US obviously is key, mainly because ultimately the end product is a drug, and the largest market is the US. But I think it is vital nowadays to look more globally on that as well.
I think Tunstall highlighted that when we were there as well, that if you can't be there all the time, it's partnering with people who can, having them as part of your business, that you can liaise with them and they can be boots on the ground for you if you can't be out there all the time, kind of partnering with someone else who maybe can. John?
Yeah. I suppose my thought is more towards the operational bit, in that when you start talking to potential VCs, it's not a single conversation. Well, hopefully it isn't a single conversation. It's kind of multiple touch points with them, and at the point that you press go on your fundraise, what's your own data flow going to come out of the company? What are the emails that you're going to be able to send out in 3 weeks and 9 weeks to keep you at the top of that email box, keep your momentum in your funding journey? And I think that's something we're going to be quite careful about.
Fantastic. Jamie?
I guess mine will sort of revolve around places, and I know one of the sort of cornerstones or pillars that John Bell set up in his industrial strategy in 2017 was creating regional centres that were places that science could grow. And I think actually that has happened, and Cambridge has always been one, but the amount of real estate that has gone into the marketplace has been pretty fantastic in the last 5 years particularly. But I think what's more important and evident from our trip to Boston is providing for all levels of growth companies. So, I think Babram's a great example of fostering new ideas and allowing them to grow, and then Biomed have built some bigger grow-on space for them to grow into, and then, of course, the ultimate utopia for them would be to grow on to Granta Park, where there's even bigger buildings. And I think finding that progression for you guys is there in all markets now, including London, Oxford and Cambridge. There are other centres that are emerging, but not in the same way. And I think it's not just about building the real estate, it's providing the services and the facilities that come with it. And I think what we've heard today an enormous amount about is there is help out there with your science, but also we need to encourage the finance to support those companies. And I think that's the only missing part. Everyone talks about the sort of ABC of science with academia and business and clinicians, and I think there's an F which we need to integrate into that to really help it go, because that seems to be the difference between a Kendall Square and a Bateman, let's say. So yeah, there are quite a few things there. Sorry.
That's good. The more you can take away, the better. And I think just for us as a sponsor of the event, to say it was an amazing opportunity, and I think for Jamie, Harry and I, we all made connections with the people in the sessions, and we've been able to follow those up and have those links as much as these guys as well. So it was really beneficial for us and to be part of helping you guys put on this great opportunity. I think we've got 2 minutes and 45 seconds if anyone's got any questions. If that's okay, Tony. Like, if we've got time.
36 seconds.
Claire.
Yeah.
There's been some talk of green, so whether it's the grass is green or the dollars are green, and what are the green shoots that you've seen? Tell them we're drinking and hope for
So when we were there wasn't really that many green shoots, to be honest. I think when I went out, I thought that there were going to be, and it was rosy. I always hear that everything's easier in the US. When you got there, you realized, well, that's really not the case. You know, there were certain parts of Boston that were like 50% unoccupied in terms of lab space. So it's pretty serious. But I think we were literally there when the tariffs, like from one day to the next, the presentations were changing. And so the level of uncertainty at that point was crazy. I think that's calmed down now. And so I would say the green shoots, certainly when I was out there in January in San Francisco, it was positive. Then it's sort of gone further down. And I think we'll be coming back up again. But ultimately, you know, business will continue, and I think that's the key thing. So it's still continue building the networks, and it's about people. So,
one more question.
I don't know whether you want to answer this, but have you much knowledge of flagship pioneering? Tell me what you think, because I find it a fascinating construct, but I can't quite work out whether there's a conflict of interest involved. Do you have anything to say?
A conflict of interest with who?
Sorry?
A conflict of interest with whom?
Well, it's just the companies that are involved are, first they're providing the technology and then they're benefiting from it. Yeah, I can't quite work it out, but tell me what you think of flagship pioneering.
So my take on flagship is similar to a trend that's being seen across the market, is the concentration of capital in a lot of
a better way of explaining it.
small, in a smaller amount of companies. I think if I was an investor, I would understand it. Logically, it makes sense. You think that there's a capital crunch, you're worried about supporting your own companies, you concentrate it more in singular ones that you think are more successful so that you can buy them more time to get to inflections. I think the detriment to that obviously is in diversity and resilience of the overall ecosystem. What if it's not a good idea? Does it mean that you've sucked away capital from the rest of the smaller companies that perhaps have better science, better technology, better ideas, but don't have the support to get off the ground? To me, it feels like a system problem. It's a rational incentive for an investor to support their existing portfolios or support their own companies that they create. It's not their responsibility necessarily to support the entire ecosystem. Does that yield the best benefit for patients? Possibly not. At the same time, they gave us Moderna, so.
Good answer.
I don't know if we're over to.
Have you got anything else? Anything to add? Sure?
Yeah, it's all right. Yeah.
No, I think we're done. Thanks, panellists. You've been fantastic.
Thank you, Natalie and Bootcamp team for sharing that. And indeed, I must say, from a One Nucleus perspective, there was a lot of learning for us just spending time with the group that went. Just hearing you digest what you'd heard in sessions, what you'd observed, how you interpreted that as a group, then it was a lot of learning for us as well as enjoyment in doing it. But for me, I'm standing between you and drinks, so I'm going to be fairly brief at this point. Just to say thanks, really, and lots of thanks from the sponsors of today, and indeed the support we get all year from our partners, our members, our corporate sponsors, and AZ as corporate patron, to the speakers, whether on panels or keynotes or around that. I think these events only work when people are prepared to sit up the front and share their thoughts on things. And, you know, it's easy to sit there and say, well, I don't want to say that in case it gets, you know, comes back to haunt me. But actually, I've been very, very grateful that speakers have been candid and open. And for me, that's what a membership group event is for. It should be a safe haven to throw ideas out and challenge things, which maybe you wouldn't do in a direct investor pitching event or something which could be career limiting. So I think that's, for me, is a very pleasing thing to see, that it feels like a safe enough environment. I think I was conscious I forgot to introduce myself at the start of this, but Tony Jones. Is my absolute pleasure to lead One Nucleus. They're a great team. They deliver events like this for me to stand up here and say thanks. But actually, I'm really grateful for the support of our members all year. It only works because of you guys. You know, we're custodians of a great network. But that's the asset we have, is you as a network. So thank you for your support. I hope you'll join us for drinks and to celebrate the end of a great day of engagement. And I'll see you downstairs in the Market Restaurant where drinks will be served. So thank you very much.